We are live. Okay, spring market strategy session. Figured it'd be a great time to jump in, talk about what exactly is happening in Toronto real estate here in 2025. And we're actually in May of 2025. So we do have some slides we're going to get through today. And this is an interactive conversation. So drop any comments down below, drop any questions down below. If I don't get to them by the end of this presentation, we'll definitely reply back for sure. So let's jump in here. And by the way, my name is Michael Ouzas. I'm a realtor here in the city of Toronto. If you ever wanted to book in a call to discuss anything that's going on in the Toronto real estate market, click on that first link down below. You can scan the QR code in the corner and book in a discovery call, a strategy session, strategy plan, seller consultation, or anything for a discovery call. Here is everything's all right here. So click on any of those links anytime, and let's jump right into what we're discussing today. So I've broken this down into a few different categories, and we're going to start off. We're going to talk about the market, what we're seeing on the ground level, and talk about months of inventory, why it matters more than arguably ever, especially today if you are a buyer or even a seller looking in today's market. For buyers, we do have some non-negotiables we're going to talk about today, and for sellers as well, some non-negotiables. And then we'll finish off with some Q&A. We had some Instagram polls going today, so we got a good amount of questions come in, and we'll go through those. And if there are any other questions, you can definitely drop them down in the chat. And I'll leave this QR code up, so if at any given time you wanted to schedule a call for yourself to discuss some of your ideas or strategy for this market, you can scan anytime. So if we take a look here, how's the market? And this is a question I feel like as a realtor, I get asked this question more than any other question ever is how's the market? And a lot of times it's just one of those questions that anyone's going to ask for any realtor. So one of the things that's interesting right now is if you type in Toronto real estate into Google, you'll get a million different responses. Same thing if you do the same thing on any AI platform. Essentially, we've been on a 6-month roller coaster, and it really is amazing to see what's actually happened in the last 6 months. And going back even to December, we got some new down payment rules and mortgage structures for first-time buyers as well. Obviously, those new down payment rules, if you watch this channel, are you no longer have to put down 20% at the $1 million mark. That number now is at 1.5 million. 30-year amortization for first-time buyers. Interest rates have now gone down to the lowest we have seen in basically 2 years, almost 3 years for that matter. We've gone down to a number that properties are about 20% cheaper than where they were on a monthly basis based on average prices, give or take. So interest rates have played a big factor. Last year, they were around 6.5% at the start of the year. This year, around 4.5%. We also saw our prime minister step down. Parliament went into prorogation. Basically, it went on pause. There's a federal election in the USA. We all know how that's turned out so far. We had a provincial election here in Ontario, the start of a trade war with the USA. The stock market also crashed in that time. We had a federal election in Canada. We do have a new prime minister now, finally. We do have a minority government, and this was one of the closest calls we have seen in some time. Inventory in Toronto real estate has continued to increase. And on the lighter side, Canada won Four Nations Face Off, which is a pretty awesome tournament. And if you know me, if you've been around this channel, I played hockey for a long time. So obviously I'm a big hockey fan. And I will say right now, it's going into game 5 for the Leafs Florida series right now. Leafs are looking pretty good. So hopefully that continues here as we move forward into the playoffs. So let's get back to this question of how is the market? And I can sum it up. Essentially, we have 5 markets going on at the same time. And here's what's happening on the ground level. So first off, and we will go through some slides to discuss these points one by one. Smaller condos have been relatively slow unless they're aggressively priced. And those are the studio or one-bedroom condos. Larger condos under $1 million have been moving, even though not all of them have been moving, but a decent amount have been moving. Bidding wars are still there. So for those that think that the entire market is very slow, I've been in competition in the last few weeks more than I have been in a long time with my buyers. And essentially, there are a few reasons for that, which we will break down as we go forward. Semi-detached and detached properties are selling if they're priced well, of course, as mentioned. They're also in bidding wars. And buyers are looking now more than ever for the ideal layouts, the properties that are renovated, and the right floor plans, whether it's a house or a condo. If we unpack these one by one, this is how it looks overall. So if we take a look at the 0 and 1 bedroom condos, so obviously 0 bedrooms is a studio and 1 bedroom condos, for the city of Toronto as a whole, and this is everything with a Toronto address. So anytime the media talks about Toronto real estate, they are talking about the greater Toronto area. It performs very different than Toronto real estate proper. Overall, for 0 and 1 bedroom condos, months of inventory right now is at 8.5 months of inventory. In April 2025, over 1,500 active listings and 181 of those sold. So essentially, 1 and 8.5 condos have been selling. And at that price point, those are your entry level condos. So think about 1 bedrooms, someone who's maybe moving to the city for the first time buyer, investor level condos. Basically, the ones that are selling have been at the lowest prices of all the other ones. If all things are equal, buyers will generally go to the lowest price properties, which makes sense. So if someone is looking for a condo in the city of Toronto, there are 1,500 1 bedrooms or studios available and 181 of them sold. So there's still a really good amount of inventory there. And of course, price definitely matters. Now, on the flip side, if we take a look at the 2 bedroom condos, and essentially for 2 bedroom condos, we're sitting at 6 months of inventory. And of course, that is still very much a buyer's market. And we will break down the months of inventory shortly as well. But overall, 531 sales is about 3 times as many sales that we saw in studios and 1 bedroom condos combined for April of 2025. And I find that's a very notable number. 3,200 active listings. So there's double the amount of listings available, but triple the amount of sales compared to studios and 1 bedroom condos. Super important to note that these condos have been selling. And again, pricing does matter here right now for condos. If we're looking at the larger spaces and the price points, if it's a large space with an ideal layout and the price point makes sense, those are the condos that are moving right now. And 1 and 6 have been moving. So generally, it's a combination of price and layout, and obviously the finishes, of course. Next up, Toronto semis. And Toronto semis, of course, always remain ultra competitive, even in today's market. And it's funny because a lot of people will come to me and say, how's the market? I hear it's very, very slow. And I do have buyers that would tell you maybe otherwise, because we have been in double digit multiple offers a few times in the last couple of months as we've gone forward here. But those are for the properties that are priced aggressively and the ones that show the very best. Overall, though, for Toronto semis, which is the most proper, it's the most popular property type, and the reason being is because price point. They're generally in around that $1 million to $2 million, depending on size, depending on parking, location, all those elements, and of course, level of renovations. Over about 60 of them have been selling above their list price, 60% of them, excuse me. And months of inventory sitting at 2 months of inventory. And as we'll see, 2 months of inventory does keep things pretty competitive for even properties, even today in today's market. Now, for semis and detached sales, the average days on market of the properties that have been selling is about 10, which means that those properties have been selling pretty quickly. Now, this is an important note to keep in mind, is that they are selling for 99% of list price. The properties that are priced well are generally already baking in the discount from what we would have seen in maybe like a 2022. And that market is long gone from where we are today. So if a property is priced about 20% below that right now, or 15% below 2022, it's going to be selling for relatively where it's listed at, because that is the current value of where it should be at today, depending on the level of finishes. But overall, 99% of list price. And this will be important when we talk about the non negotiables for buyers and for sellers moving forward. Now, I put this picture in. This is Studio McGee. She's probably one of the most popular designers here going lately. Renovations, layouts, and floor plans matter more than ever in 2025. And what I'm finding with all my buyers right now is they are looking for the most perfect properties. And it makes sense, because when there are more choice available on the market, we're trying to find them the best properties that we can actually find them. And when we talk about non-negotiables for sellers, keep this in mind because this will be really important moving forward to sell in 2025 as well. But essentially, those are the five uh, markets that we are seeing here in the city of Toronto. Those five markets. So you have the smaller condos, the larger condos, the semi-detached market, the well-priced semis and detached, and the renovated best layouts with the best floor plans. That's what's going on right now in the market in the city of Toronto. Now, if we take a look at months of inventory, and I bring this up because I feel like now more than ever, this matters a lot. And if you're a buyer and you're coming to me and we're going to sit down for a strategy session, one of the first questions I'm going to ask you is what area are you looking for and what property type are you looking for? And these are why it matters so much because if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I heard the market's really slow. I'm looking for a semi-detached property in Bloor West Village or in Roncesvalles or in Leslieville or in you name it, Midtown," then typically those properties are very active and generally selling in competition right now. So it's a very different market than if someone comes and says, I'm looking for a one bedroom condo in downtown Toronto. Totally different market as we just discussed. So when talking about months of inventory, super important to note. Now there is one other factor that I will mention is the renovated versus unrenovated property. And I don't really have any proper data to show those in a chart. What I can say is I have been in so many properties as of late with buyers where we walk in and almost immediately turn around because they just do not present very well. And those properties, I find, if they're not priced at a number that makes sense for somebody, if they were to come in and renovate it and then be able to resell it, those properties are sitting for a long, long time. So that's definitely playing a factor on the inventory right now. And the A plus inventory is selling if it's priced well, and the C minus inventory is sitting, especially if it's not priced well. When we take a look at months of inventory, there's basically few things that we're taking a look at. And active listings divided by number of sales equals months of inventory. Now, if we take a look at what these numbers look like, 2 months of inventory and below, so 0 to 2 months, is a seller's market. So if there are two active listings and one of them sold, we have 2 months of inventory. In a market with 2 months of inventory, so if you're looking at a micro area, so for example, one of these prime areas that are still very competitive right now, sellers will still have the upper hand. It's very difficult to negotiate because generally, if there's multiple offers, they will pick most likely the best offer. Less choice, and properties are still selling. And as we just mentioned, they are selling. The ones that are selling in about 10 days. So we still have to be pretty quick on those properties that are in those 2 months of inventory types of properties. And of course, generally higher pricing. So when we see those months of inventory at 2 or below, that's when we start to see those bidding wars and the prices increase as well. Now, if we take a look at 4 months of inventory, it's a pretty balanced market. So that's where between 3 and 5 months of inventory keeps us in that balanced market. That's where you have a balance between buyers and sellers, and terms can be favorable on both sides. So maybe the closing date's more important, or maybe the price is more important, or different elements that are into the offer. That's where the terms can be favorable for both sides. That being said, properties are still selling. And as we mentioned, the ones that are fully renovated, that have the best layouts, that look the best, even in a balanced market, if there's four properties on the market, the one that stands out the most will be the one that sells if it's priced well. And as mentioned, great properties will still sell quickly. Now, if we take a look at 6 months of inventory, and that puts us into a buyer's market, 6 months and above. So if we just talked about the one bedroom and studio condos being at 8.5 months of its inventory, that is very much a buyer's market. Now, at 6 months of inventory, we're also in a buyer's market. That's where buyers do have the upper hand, and it is easier to negotiate because there's just more choice. That being said, with properties taking longer to sell, we are still seeing, even in today's market, the properties that look the best with the best layouts that are priced the best are still moving. So it is something that once we factor in those factors, and if they're in the best buildings and locations, of course, those properties are still moving, and that will be the 1 out of 6 that sells. So if you do want to be the 1 out of 6 that's selling, Generally, price will be the first metric if you're presented well and marketed well as well. Let's take a look here at these months of inventory. And I like this because Urbanation broke it down between City of Toronto and 905 region. As mentioned, when the media talks about Toronto real estate, they're talking about the greater Toronto areas. And that's a big difference than just the City of Toronto. For detached properties in the 905 region, so anything outside the city, you're at 4.7 months of inventory. This data went all the way back to February, so it does need to get updated. But essentially, you could see that there is a discrepancy or difference between 416 and 905, detached at 4.2, semis at 3.5, and towns 3.7. We know that semis right now in Toronto is around 2. So this is also factoring in townhouses and row houses, which could bringing that up. Condos at 6, and outside the city 6.6. Now this is where it really stands out, is that pricing month or year over year actually went up in the city of Toronto for detached and semis. We saw this from February into March, but we didn't see it as much in April. And then for the detached market, down across the board, same with semis and condos for the 905 region. And these are 5% decreases almost on average. So big difference going outside the city of Toronto versus inside the city of Toronto. Of course, these are the February numbers from Urbanation, but we are seeing a similar story here as we've gone through March and April. Now, when it comes to non-negotiables, and I've changed the name of this, I'm just calling it non-negotiables because usually it was a 3-point item line, but there are a few extra that I think we do need to talk about. So, the first one of the non negotiables is getting your pre approval. And I know I say this often, but it is so important. And the reason being is that if you find that 1 out of 5 property, or if we're searching and you find that one property that stands out amongst all the others, you'll want to make sure that you are ready to make that purchase if it's within your budget. And the only way to know your budget for real is to get an actual pre-approval, not an online pre-approval, an actual pre-approval from a mortgage specialist, mortgage broker, someone who can actually give you your budget so you know exactly what you're shopping with, so that we can also look for those properties that are within your budget, and we're not seeing properties that should be selling over and above what you can afford, because that's also not the best feeling if a property sells way out of budget, because those are typically the ones that most buyers will fall in love with. Plan and strategy. So having a clear plan on moving forward, maybe there's some elements that need to be moved around from a perspective of one, getting the pre-approval, but two, maybe you have a property to sell, maybe you are in a lease or you're moving back to the city at a certain point. Having that plan and strategy of how to move forward with that, super important, but also knowing what's happening in the market that you're considering making a move to. The next one up, and I really believe in this, and that's getting out to see property. And the reason I believe in getting to see property is because so many times a buyer, when we first meet and first have that initial discovery call and then the strategy session, and we talk about strategy, when we talk about some of the must-haves, needs, wants lists, those change as we get to see more properties, especially when we just start to see what things are selling for within certain budgets. So when you start to see how things are selling and what they're selling for and what exactly that budget includes, that's where getting out to see property and maybe being able to make some compromises, especially in a city like Toronto, or even just getting out to see, getting a feel for a semi versus a detached, or for a certain condo or location. All those factors matter. Getting to know what you like and don't like. The next thing I'll say is tune out the media, because not everything is actually slow out there. We've been in competition over and over again in the last few weeks with all different buyers in all different price points and categories. It really just depends on the property type. So not everything is super slow. And it's really important that when those numbers come out every single month, the media loves negative attention. They don't ever really say Toronto real estate's just chilling. And it would be nice if they did sometimes, but essentially it's either super hot or super slow. So tune it out, because this is your journey and on your timeline. So it's really important to stick with that. The next one up is most price discounts are built in and the accurately priced properties are selling. And the reason I say this is that sometimes if a buyer's looking at a price that, on a property that's priced really well today, but looking to offer maybe 20% below that number, it might not set you up for success in today's market. 2022 is far behind us. The peak of the market, what everyone's calling quote unquote the peak, and it was the peak of the market, April 22 in the city of Toronto. Those numbers are long gone. And sellers, is important for you to know that as well. Those numbers are long, long gone. So if a property is priced at a 2022 price, we know that it's overpriced. And that's not exactly where it should be on a market value. If the property is priced where it should be today, and it's a great property that looks great in a great location, it will sell, as we saw already, within 10 days for 99% of what it's listed at. The properties that are not selling or sitting for longer are generally a little bit overpriced, or maybe they don't show that great in person. But the ones that are priced great in the best areas are selling very quickly. So that's something to consider, is that if it's priced well, it would be priced at today's value. And of course, we'll try to negotiate as best we can for that property. But there is an element of, if it's priced well and it's a property that you want and it's within your budget, then that's maybe the play to go and pay the price that they're at if it makes sense and if it's priced where it should be in 2025. Now, we always talk about the buyer triangle when we sit down on a strategy session. Essentially, buyers can typically pick two of three, especially if they have a budget: location, price, and property. So if we factor for location, location, it holds very true in the city of Toronto. School districts matter, accessibility matters, being able to get on to transit, walk to coffee shops, all those factors in the city of Toronto matter a lot, especially as traffic's getting worse and worse these days. The property, what are the level of finishes inside? Is it updated? Is it at 2025 updates? Was the renovation 10 years ago and now it's feeling dated? All those factors matter. And then the last piece is the price. And if you want the best location and the best property, I can almost promise you in the city of Toronto, you will pay a pretty significant price for that property. If you want the best property at the best price, you will generally sacrifice on the location in a city of Toronto. And if you want the location that's the best location and the very best, cheapest price, I can promise you in this city, you will sacrifice on the house and or the condo, and that property will most likely need some work here in the city of Toronto. The last key I will leave, and the last one of the item or the last yeah the last key I will leave you with in 2025 for buyers specifically, is that decisive buyers are winning in 2025. The buyers who know what they want, have a plan, and work towards that plan to find exactly what they're looking for within their budget, and being realistic on what they can get within their budget, but also being decisive. And when they are presented with many opportunities, how do we tune out the ones that don't make the most sense and really focus in on those prime properties, so that when you get that one and you're decisive and able to make that decision, those are the buyers that are winning right now in 2025. And they're making these decisions and purchasing these great properties at prices that are discounted from where they were a couple years ago. Those buyers are definitely winning in 2025. Next up, we have non-negotiables for sellers in 2025. And this is one of those things where if you're looking to sell a property right now in the city of Toronto, whether it's a condo or a house, this is not the time to quote unquote test the market. Those 2022 prices we just discussed are long behind us. So if you're thinking of just going to test the market because your property is maybe better than everybody else's, it could sit for a good amount of time. Or if you're just testing it at a price that doesn't make a lot of sense to sell, it's not really something that the buyers will jump at if they don't feel that all the boxes are checked on their end. When it comes to checked boxes, presentation, how does your property look, feel, smell, whatever the case may be when buyers come in? And believe me when I say properties do not show the same in person as they do online. So if your property shows a certain way online and then a buyer steps in and it's dirty, it's messy, it's not staged perfectly, it doesn't look the same, There's a lot of repairs that need to happen. Buyers care a lot about that right now in 2025, and there are non-negotiables there when it comes to buyers, what they're looking for in this market. You need to have great staging, make your property look fantastic. If you have to do any decluttering, all those elements the staging bring to the table, so that way it's ready to go and show ready. So having that show ready property is super important. All the maintenance needs to get done. So key repairs completed, walls painted, lighting. There's no negotiating here when it comes to how your property needs to show when buyers come through, because buyers right now with more inventory on the market are going to pick the best ones that they can find and generally offer on those properties. Marketing to the max, and this is a non-negotiable for me on any of my listings, but we talk about pro photography, pro videography, professional prints, websites, social media, open houses, all of it. This is not a market to dial back a little bit because things are not moving as quickly. This is a market to actually level up even more. And how do we get more exposure for your property, even in a market that has other properties out there? So you really want to maximize these tools in order to get your property sold in 2025. And if you met it with anybody who says this doesn't work or that doesn't work, I can assure you that it takes an army right now to get everything ready to go to sell in 2025. So you want to make sure you check all these boxes as you move forward in order to maximize your price in today's market. Price strategy, definitely based on the months of inventory for your property or location, and knowing what that looks like on a micro market level, knowing what things are selling for, how long they're selling for, average price to list price, but also knowing if buyers are out there and the inventory is low versus high for your location. And price is everything in 2025. So if what we're finding is even if you're maybe 10% overpriced, you may not get any showings or any offers. 5% overpriced, you may get some showings but no offers. If you're within those 1 to 2% pricing, that's when you start to get showings and offers. And those values are market values that are a moving target right now as we go through 2025. So knowing what the current sales are, what's been selling, how it's been selling, how it looks, and then pricing accordingly is going to set you up for success here, and then definitely non-negotiable in summer and spring of 2025. Let's open it up to some questions here. These ones came in a little bit earlier today. We'll start with these, and if there's anything else in the chat, we'll jump in on those. So first question, do we expect a rise in inventory around BOC interest rate announcements? So the next one is coming up shortly. I don't believe we're going to get an even bigger amount of inventory coming up after this long weekend here in May. I feel that a lot of the inventory has already come to market following Easter and the election. I do think that if sellers have been working to get their property ready in the spring, they most likely have already got to the market or are pretty close. So we might see a little bit of a trickle effect coming in, but I do feel most of the properties on the market have been getting ready to set up for the spring market, and they've already kind of launched at this point. So I'm not sure if the next rate announcement will bring about more inventory or if the current inventory will just start getting absorbed, because if we don't get more inventory, then buyers will be purchasing up the stuff that's already on the market right now. Do online pre-approvals count? This is a great question. So online pre-approvals, when you go on the bank, like whatever bank's website, and type in how much can I afford, the challenge with those is they don't factor in any elements of credit score, any debts owing, anything like that. They actually don't account for any of that at all. Essentially, you're just putting in your income, and on average, like I guess the old saying is like 4 times income is kind of what you qualify for. That's basically all it's doing. So that's not a real qualification. In fact, I'd recommend if you are looking to get a pre-approval done, it's better to get one done sooner than later so that they rate hold for 120 days typically. And that way, if you can lock in today's rate, if the rate does go up in the future, not knowing the uncertainty of the trade war or anything like that, or the unemployment or any of those elements, if the rates do go up for whatever reason, then you're locked in at your current rate. And if they go down, you can just relock in at the newer rate. So that's one of the things where if you're even considering making a move in the market in spring or summer of 2025, getting that pre-approval done sooner than later definitely super important. I think it will set you up for success as well. I know it will set you up for success. My agent said it's slow out there. Interesting. Well, this is one of those things where in this kind of market, it's really important to not just talk to maybe one person, because if their business is slow, that's not an overall blanket statement of how the market is. I can tell you, as someone who's very active in the Toronto real estate market, business is not slow out there. In fact, I'd argue that I'm busier than I ever have been before. And I know other agents that are the same. And I feel that if buyers are out there and they know and they're working with someone who's actively on the ground level in the market that has a pulse of the market, they'll be able to make decisions easier because we know exactly what's going on out there in the market today. Whereas if someone's says that the market's slow and they think that it's a slow approach to make a decision, if a buyer is looking for the prime time property in a prime time area, there's it's not that slow out there for those properties, that's for sure. And even for condos, the best condos, most buyers have already been out there looking. So if a new condo comes up that checks a lot of boxes, those buyers that have already been looking will snap those up because they've already seen what's already on the market. So it's not enough to just for someone to say that it's slow out there. You have to know exactly micro market dependent, property type dependent, location dependent. All those elements mixed in are definitely important to know moving forward here, especially in 2025. How long does the entire process take from pre-approval to finding the property and closing? I would always say this is about a 4 to 6 month process. The pre-approval could take some time. Tax season just ended. That usually helps in that process, but generally it might take a month for the pre-approval, a couple weeks, and then as you move forward on the property search, depending on what you're looking for, it could take maybe a week, or for most people, it takes a little bit of time. There's also that discovery of what kind of property you like, how things, location, how things look when you're in person. And then also the element of if you are in multiple offers, it may take a few attempts to actually land that property that you're looking for as you move along here. So it does take some time. It's not as simple as, okay, I want to buy something and buy something tomorrow. Some buyers could do that, but not most buyers. Most buyers generally it's about a 4 to 6 month process between starting the conversation and when you get the keys to your door. Variable versus fixed. Okay, I'm not a mortgage broker, but I would say the one thing that matters if you are considering variable or fixed, because they're about the same right now. They were a big difference before. Is what are your plans with your property? So if you're renewing, for example, and you're in a property that you're considering maybe making a move on in the shorter term, maybe a variable offers a little more flexibility on the terms to sell, like from a penalty standpoint. If you're in a property and you're up for renewal and you don't want to move, then maybe a fixed makes sense. And I would say it's case by case dependent, of course. And if you're a new buyer or getting into a purchase and considering variable versus fixed, the risk tolerance is also super important. Some people like to know exactly what their payments are going to be for the next 5 years or 3 years or whatever it may be. And other people would rather try to ride the wave. And if you think economic uncertainty is going to continue, then maybe the rates will come down a little bit more and you may save a little bit there. But case by case dependent, obviously reach out to your mortgage broker and see what they think, of course, and go from there. Next question here. How are semi-detached properties in the East End and the West End? Well, it's interesting. They're both very active. So if you're looking, for example, Roncy, Bloor West, or Leslieville, Riverdale, those properties, those semis in those areas are very hot. They're getting multiple offers, especially the ones that are renovated and ready to go. The ones that need a lot of work, I'm finding, are not moving quite quickly, or the ones with maybe the smaller layouts or maybe no parking. Those kind of factors are playing a bit of a role there, but it really case by case dependent. But the ones that check all the boxes, have the best layouts, are fully renovated, have parking, have a backyard, have all those elements on the great locations, still very, very active. Okay, that's all I got here. Thank you for tuning in to this spring session seminar webinar. It's about a half hour. We're going to repost this on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and that's QR code down below. If you wanted to book in a call to discuss your plans for Toronto real estate, definitely scan the QR code, click the link down below. Happy to help. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.